Okay, so today we're diving into a thinker who is, well, she's a big deal, but she's also famously incredibly hard to read. We're talking about Gayatri Chakravorty Spivak. If you've ever heard of post-colonial studies, you've probably heard her name, but you've also probably heard that her writing is intense.
And look, that's not just us saying it. This quote right here gets to the heart of the issue. People critique her all the time for how dense her writing is. It's this weird paradox, right? Her ideas are absolutely crucial, but actually trying to read her work, it can feel like climbing a mountain. And that's true for everyone, from first-year students to professors who've been doing this for decades. So, that leads to the big question, doesn't it? If she is so hard to read, why are we even talking about her? Why is she considered so essential? Why do people keep wrestling with her ideas? Well, that's exactly what we're going to get into today.
All right, let's start by looking at this problem in a totally different way. What if her difficult style isn't a flaw? What if it's intentional? What if the complexity, the thing that makes you want to tear your hair out, is actually part of her whole point?
This is the key right here. Spivak's writing is not supposed to be a breezy read. Think about it. We live in a world of hot takes and 5-minute summaries. Her work is a rebellion against that. It literally forces you, the reader, to stop, to slow down, and to do the real hard work of understanding something complicated. It's an ethical choice. The struggle you feel trying to get through a paragraph, she'd argue that's a tiny taste of the real deep struggle of understanding oppression. It's a direct challenge to all of us who want a quick, easy answer. Okay, so how does she actually do this? To really get a handle on Spivak's impact, we've got to go back to the beginning, to her first big move. This is where she took some super abstract philosophy coming out of France and gave it some serious political teeth. And I mean, you can't overstate what a huge deal this was. Back in 1976, she translated Jacques Derrida's Of Grammatology. Now, just doing that was a massive achievement. It basically introduced the whole concept of deconstruction to the English-speaking world. But Spivak didn't just translate it. In her preface, which is now legendary, she basically said, hey, this deconstruction thing, it's not just some abstract game for philosophers. It's a weapon. It's a tool we have to use to take apart the very language and logic that holds up colonialism. So, to make this political move, she pulls out this really important idea from Karl Marx. It's all about the word representation. See, in German, there are 2 different words for it. You've got Darstellen, which is like representation in a picture, how you depict something. And then you have Vertreten, which is like how a politician represents their voters. They speak for them. And Spivak's huge insight is that we mix these 2 up all the time, and it's a disaster. Just because you can draw a picture of someone or write a story about them doesn't mean you have the right to speak for them. In fact, she says that when privileged people think they can just speak for the oppressed, they often end up silencing them even more. And that idea leads us straight into her most famous essay, and probably her most misunderstood, Can the Subaltern Speak? The title sounds simple, but she's not asking if people without power can, physically make sounds. Of course they can. The real question is, when they speak, is anyone listening? Or more importantly, are the systems of power even capable of hearing what they have to say? The core concept she uses to explain this is something she calls epistemic violence. Now, this isn't about physical harm. It's a kind of violence that happens at the level of knowledge. It's when a powerful system basically says, your way of understanding the world, your history, your truth, it doesn't count. It's not valid. It's like trying to play a game where the other team makes up all the rules and says your points don't matter. It completely silences you by making it impossible for you to even be understood.
And true to form, Spivak doesn't just leave this as an abstract idea. She brings it down to earth with a single, heartbreaking, and incredibly powerful real-life story. It's the story of a young woman named Bhuvaneshwari Bhaduri, who was a freedom fighter in India during the British colonial period.
So Bhaduria was part of this resistance movement, and she was given the task of a political assassination. But she couldn't go through with it, and she was terrified that if she was captured, she'd be tortured and give up her comrades. So she made the decision to end her own life. But, and this is the crucial part, she knew exactly how society would interpret a young woman's suicide. They'd assume it was because of some forbidden love affair, so she did something incredibly deliberate. She waited until she was menstruating to take her life. Why? To send a clear message. It was physical proof that she wasn't pregnant, so her act couldn't be dismissed as a story of shame. It was a political statement, literally written on her body. And here's the absolute gut punch that proves Spivak's entire point. It didn't work. No one got the message. The structures of her society, the patriarchy, the colonial mindset, the focus on family honor, they were like a brick wall. They were completely unable to read her political act. Instead, her death was immediately reinterpreted through the only stories they knew how to tell, stories of tragic love or family shame. Her attempt to speak, to make this powerful political statement, was completely erased. And that story, that failure of communication, is the heart of her famous conclusion. When Spivak says the subaltern as female cannot be heard or read, she's talking about Bhuvaneshwari Baduri. She means that even when a woman on the margins tries to seize control of her own narrative, tries to speak in the clearest way she can, the system itself is not built to understand her. The silence isn't an accident. It's built into the very structure of power. But Spivak doesn't stop there. She digs even deeper. In her later, even more complex work, she starts to trace the source of this problem. And she finds it's not just in colonial policies or social norms. She argues the roots of this silencing go all the way back to the foundations of Western philosophy.
Yeah, in her huge book, A Critique of Post-Colonial Reason, she brings in this idea she borrows from psychoanalysis called foreclosure. It's a bit of a tricky concept, but think of it like this. She says that when major Western philosophers, like Kant, were coming up with their ideas of the universal human being, the rational thinking person, they had to, by definition, kick someone out of that club. And who got kicked out? The colonial subject, the native. They were defined as the opposite of rational.
And Spivak argues this wasn't just some accident or a blind spot. It was absolutely necessary for their logic to work. By casting the colonial subject as irrational, or savage, or childlike, Western thought created a kind of moral permission slip for itself. It gave this civilizing mission of empire its justification. See? This philosophical move wasn't just talk. It laid the intellectual groundwork for real-world violence.
Okay, so if the problem is that deep, like baked into the very fabric of Western thought, what on earth are we supposed to do about it? Well, this is where Spivak's work takes a really powerful turn. She doesn't just leave us with a problem. She moves from pointing out what's wrong to figuring out what we can do.
And one way she does this is by asking us to think about the difference between two words, globality and planetarity. Globality is kind of what we have now. It's the world of global finance and the internet, where everything gets smoothed out and made the same. It's a globe you can manage from a computer screen. Planetarity, on the other hand, is totally different. It's an ethical idea. It's about seeing the planet as, well, a planet. Something we can't control, something we share with others who are fundamentally different from us, and that we have a responsibility to.
And this is maybe the most important thing to know about Spivak. This isn't just talk for her. She actually puts her money where her mouth is. For more than 30 years, while being a world-famous professor at Columbia, she has been on the ground, running schools and training teachers for some of the poorest, most marginalized children in rural West Bengal.
And her teaching method is literally her philosophy in action. It's amazing. So the first step is to teach the kids the formal, proper rules of the Bengali alphabet. Give them the structure. But then, and this is the key, she tells the teachers to encourage the kids to jumble the structure, to mess with it, play with it, break the rules. What does this do? It stops them from just memorizing things by rote. It teaches them how to think for themselves. It is a direct, practical way to fight back against that epistemic violence we talked about by empowering kids to make their own meaning.
And that brings us right back to where we began, with this idea of difficulty. Spivak's work is hard because her whole point is that understanding the world, really understanding it, is hard work. She's making a demand on all of us, a demand to slow down, to put in the effort, to question everything we think we know. So, in this age of instant gratification and easy answers, the question really is that a demand worth meeting?